Well, I gotta say, if you like blue sky, you've come to the right place. This is your one-stop shop on YouTube for clear skies and, well, a little bit of cumulus. But looking up to the north, we do have some very distant anvils. That's some convection up there on the Red River in Oklahoma, in the southern counties of Oklahoma, about 120 miles away. So we'll check that out here shortly. The Southwestern Us Regional Map looks like this afternoon, and there's that line of thunderstorms there in Oklahoma, and it's put out a pretty good outflow boundary covering much of the state. I did forget to mark the dry line, but let's see where that is. It's going to run about like that. Looks like some sort of low pressure area right there in the panhandle. And some moisture on the high plains of Colorado there, so I'll put that dry line about like that. And there you go. That's the picture right there. Pretty good heat low there across southern New Mexico. Temperatures up to 104 at Deming. But as you go west, things become a little bit more seasonal. These temperatures are not particularly high. And up to the north, a little stagnating front there in the Salt Lake City and Winnemucca area. And there's the satellite picture this afternoon. You can see those anvils there in Oklahoma. Looks like that activity is pretty much gusted out. Don't see a whole lot of cumulus towers in there. So that's a little decaying MCS. And it'll probably die out as it gets into the Arklatex region. If we take a close look at the flow across New Mexico and Arizona, we can see a very faint outline of anticyclonic flow, kind of like that. So that's that big subtropical ridge covering that area. No wonder it's so hot in the lower valleys there. But it looks like there's just enough moisture for some convection. So this is kind of like a very weak monsoon pattern. Let's check out those dew points. Yeah, they're pretty low, 35 and maybe some 40s in the mountains. So that's definitely on the low end of things. And Tucson struggling to get up to a 52-degree dew point. And we do see prevailing westerlies set up across the central Rockies there. The northwestern U.S. this Friday afternoon shows low pressure in Wyoming around the Gillette area, located right about there. And we've got this warm front extending up into North Dakota, very warm conditions up into the 80s. And you can see some of that moisture making it into the Broadus and whatever that town is right there, Mobridge, 62-degree dew point. Further down the warm front, we've got a thunderstorm cluster, and you can see that marking for the thunderstorms, line of axis of thunderstorms there. And we're actually expecting more storms there later this afternoon. It's under, I believe, an enhanced risk. Now, that's not going to be from this activity. This is dying, just like that Oklahoma activity. But you can see the moisture here. See that 56 and even a 65 there. That's what we're watching. In fact, there's 58 there, and then we get 25, so this is the dry line. See, 58 there, 35 there, dry line, kind of running about like that, then it kind of gets a little diffuse. But we are expecting storms to develop right around there and move eastward, and probably become severe as they interact with the moisture axis. Elsewhere, let's see, we've got cool oceanic high moving into Washington and Oregon. There it is right there. We see temperatures in Seattle of 61. Man, that would be great about now. 67 at Portland. And even pretty mild in the valleys. Here's the satellite loop. Well, what do we see here? This looks like a shortwave moving into the area. This looks like dynamic lift. We can see pretty much a whole mess of different clouds and even this little high-based line of activity. This is up around the, I guess, Devil's Tower area. This is probably going to become a little bit more surface-based as it approaches South Dakota, and then we may see additional development out here in the high terrain. So that may be what comes together there in South Dakota later this afternoon. So see that little cumulus right there around, I guess that'd be about Chugwater. eastern Wyoming. That's what you're going to want to keep an eye on. And probably by the time you watch this video, it should be well into some sort of stage of development. And then further out there on the Central Plains, there's those towers from that stuff there in South Dakota. On the last frame, doesn't look very impressive except for that tail end storm. Yeah, that one's not doing too bad there. So that would be another opportunity. But it looks like maybe the outflow, well, can't really see it from here, but yeah, that could be interesting. Okay, so let's go into the northeast U.S. We've got a pretty well-developed frontal system moving through the Midwest, especially Michigan there, and a couple of squall lines in Ohio. They're getting quite a bit of thunderstorm activity. And you can see right out ahead of the squall lines, very warm conditions and very high dew points, up to 68 in that area. 94 in Erie, 91 at Buffalo. So that's some potent moisture out ahead of these thunderstorms. And then out to the west, on the west side of the cold front, cooler conditions with 74 at Milwaukee and 84 at Chicago. And that's that little push of colder air coming out of Minnesota and Manitoba. Out east, there's Tropical Storm Faye right off the coast of Delaware. Looks like that's going to be coming up into New Jersey this afternoon and into New York later tonight. There's the NHC bulletin at this time. We got winds up to 60 miles an hour. That's just below hurricane strength. And looking at that trustee advisory here, little change in the strength before it moves inland later today or this evening. And we've got landfall at about 0Z, so that's coming up in about 4 to 5 hours. And you can see that gradual dissipation of the circulation. But certainly, I would expect down limbs. You know, you get a long period of sustained winds, hours of that, and that's going to take branches down, and you're going to get scattered power outages here and there. Especially, you know, with the trees being green, and that's going to be a lot of surface area for the winds to act on. So that would probably be about the main threat this evening, and of course the damage from any limbs that do come down. So I guess I'll have to look at the model output, but I think that main track, actually that's going to be into New Jersey and probably up into the Hudson Valley region. And the Poconos, probably. Anyway, let's check out the satellite. There's our satellite loop for this afternoon. It looks like Faye is off the coast of southern New Jersey, right around Atlantic City. And the main inland storm surge is on the north side there, winds coming from the east into northern New Jersey and the coastal regions there. So I'm not exactly sure what the tides and storm surge is doing, but I would expect at least a little bit of minor flooding coming into that area. Here's the METEOR observations for Atlantic City, and this goes back to about 3 or 4 hours ago at the bottom of the screen. I mean, we can go back further. In fact, yeah, the winds were stronger overnight or this morning. Let's see, they picked up at about dawn, kicked up to 26 knots, and I guess about the highest I'm seeing is 38 knots at 14Z. That's going to be about 10 a.m. The winds were out of the northeast, and they became a little bit more easterly. And then we can look at the pressures. You can see they fall from 2969 down to 2956, so the storm is still approaching that area. Looks like there is a little bit of weakening going on, even as the pressures fall. Also, the storms in Ohio. Yeah, quite a few of them. Doesn't look like a solid line. I guess it's not a squall line. These are kind of like isolated areas of thunderstorms. Anyway, that's moving eastward, and the risk from SPC is on the low side, so that's fortunate. This is that time of year when you can get tornado outbreaks in the northeast U.S., and thankfully this is not one of them. And out to the west, yeah, there's that big cold surge coming in. Well, not a huge cold surge, but definitely cold air advection, destabilization of the air mass from strong heating beneath mid-level cold air, and that's what's happening in that region. And in the southeastern U.S., pretty quiet, just kind of a weak westerly flow in most locations. I don't see much evidence of any boundaries, pretty consistent 91, 92 degree readings, and near 70 dew points all along that line there. So that's a pretty homogeneous air mass, and it extends probably all the way to Austin and San Antonio. Not much to say about that. The satellite loop also showing homogeneous conditions. Maybe one little boundary there in southern Mississippi. That's going to be an old thunderstorm complex maybe from this morning or last night. And yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. Your typical summer activity in Florida at work down there. And in Europe, a fast-moving Atlantic frontal system moving through that area. You can see out in the warm sector in southern Poland and Slovenia there. Looks a lot like Illinois or Ohio with 81/59. Well, maybe not Ohio, probably more like Michigan or maybe Missouri. And then as we go west, get into that cooler air, upper 50s and low 60s. Man, that would be beautiful right now. And that's that Atlantic air coming inland and drying things out. And of course, they're going to warm up probably over the weekend as that air mass modifies. For our astronomy calendar, the big attraction is Comet Neowise. Now, I can't vouch for how good it is because it's a morning object and I don't get up at 5, 6 a.m., not me. But you will see that out to the east, and it will look like this. Just before the sun rises, look low on the horizon, a little bit to the left of where the sun usually rises, and it may or it should be there. Also, Venus will be pretty high up, and it will be quite bright. It reached its maximum illumination this morning. Now, the location of Neowise will change over the next week. Let me show you how to look on Wednesday. See how it gets lower? So the viewing conditions in the morning will get gradually worse. You can see by this point, it's going to be competing with the light of the rising sun. But let's check out what it looks like in the evening. Here's this evening. That's what the sky looks like. You can see that, yeah, Neowise does show up, but it is competing with the sun's light. But by Wednesday, you can see it's much higher. So it'll be easier to see it later during the dusk. So that'll be something to check out. Hopefully it sticks around for another week or so. The Pocono Mountains. Where is it? Well, you probably heard me mention that earlier on the webcast. It's not listed on this map, but it's going to be this range of mountains right here in northeast Pennsylvania. It's going to be around the Scranton, Pennsylvania area. Popular resort region. Popular honeymoon getaway during the summer and during the winter. Skiing. Now, it's not particularly important as far as weather, but it's one of those regions we refer to on weather maps, and locally, it probably does have some influence on the climate in northeast Pennsylvania. So there you go, the Poconos. And that's all I have for our Friday afternoon. Thank you for joining the webcast. Hopefully we'll see you again next week. That's going to be on Tuesday. And if you're one of the supporters, we will see you on Monday. All right, take care all. Have a great one. Bye-bye.